before. It's called like Thunderbolts of the Gods, and it has it's like kind of like the theory about how there's all these petroglyphs all over the world that are showing very similar imagery. And like we think that it's like, oh, it's like, yeah, they're just drawing a bunch of suns with like eight spokes on it or whatever. Like that's just the symbol of the sun. But it's, or like a little guy with his arms like going like this and his legs going like that. And you think like, oh, okay, well that's just, you know, they're just drawing a little dude doing a dance or something. Yeah, representation. But it's like actually they show like what electricity looks like in certain plasmic forms when it spurts off jolts. So they think like, no, that must have been something that was going on in the sky. And if you have very limited amount of time of life left, and you know that you got to like translate something to future generations, and you don't going to use your language because you don't know that they can speak your language, what are you going to draw? You're going to be like, this happened in the sky, this happened in the sky. He's like, and it's everywhere. So it's kind of interesting because like it's in Australia, like these, like, and they go into examples of where you can find like South America, North America, Europe, you know, all these places where you can have these same symbols. And so that's an interesting way of interpreting that stuff that I hadn't thought about before. That was cool. And then also they talk about how comets are actually, it's like basically like a piezoelectric effect within it's like an electric effect happening when this body is going through the space, instead of like how we're traditionally taught is it's like ice melting off of it or like particles coming off it. But if you think about like Hale-Bopp or something, which has been around, it comes around every 77, not Hale-Bopp, what's that other one? Halley's Comet.
Halley's,
yeah, that comes around like every 70 something years. Like, and that's been coming around since Galileo's time. Okay, so you're looking at like 500, like it would be ran out of matter to release at that rate already if it's been going on for this and this and this. So I mean, there's some other effect happening that we're not talking about. And they basically like postulate that it's the way in which we're not putting electricity into the factor of our universe at all. You know, we think of it as just atoms and particles, and we don't look at the effects of actual electricity and stuff. So I don't know, it's kind of like an interesting little side dig that we should look into.
Right. Well, it does make sense. You know, we, again, going back to electrical beings and electrical universe, where it probably has a greater effect than, or it should be looked at more deeply than we're looking at it right now. We don't, like you said, we're not really considering it. So yeah, something to think about. Yeah, you don't even think about that. Like you said, it's just like ice or particles coming off, but it could be other things. But the thing about those representations of possibly some kind of electric or what was happening in the stars when these petroglyphs, I think that with a lot of things, I think that there's multiple interpretations of them. And I don't think that any of them are necessarily the right or the wrong one. You know, I think that that they can have a lot of different meaning that could be true anyway, depending on, I don't know, either your thought about it or what you find, or it could just have, the symbol could have multiple meanings. That could be just a man, or it could be electricity and how it affects man, and then you can get into different ideas about it. Like the flower of life too, when it keeps popping up, and it's like, well, what is this flower of life that keeps popping up? And then you think about the whole like essence of, like the grid. That's right, the grid around the earth. You could think about it like that, or you could think about like the building blocks that's in everything, or you can think about it as I don't know, like repeating history, or fractals, or anything you could think about that could really be true, or like the tree of life even. And I don't know, there's just it's like you open up a little Pandora's box, and it just keeps getting, oh wow, that's great, like that's a school of thought, or some, like maybe somebody has an idea about it and there's a whole physics behind it, and that's the avenue they go down. And then like maybe people that are into some kind of, I don't know, theology or something else would be looking at it in a different perspective. It's just different lens.
It's interesting because it's like, but it does make me kind of second guess the thing of oh, there's like some grunting cavemen in a cave going, oh, give me that chisel. I'm gonna draw a monkey or something that looks like a, you know, a bull. Like you kind of start going like, was there meaning behind the, like, what was the intent? Like, is there intention or not? You know, because like the way we are almost like the story that's like non-verbalized to us, but it's just like, oh, look what like the little babies did. Oh, isn't that cute?
Yeah, we're considering them as like non-conscious beings or non.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
It's like look, they almost like they were trying to do representational art, you guys. Like in art history, that's literally like they start you with like the caved paintings in France, and they're like, aw, like look, this is the first representation of a figure we have.
Right, like here's some goats they drew. Right.
This is so cute. And it's a little condescending the way we think of the past in a lot of ways.
That is true. It is condescending, like as if we're more evolved now than they were at that point. Like as if we've come so far, and we're so enlightened now.
But I mean, it all it takes is one like giant natural disaster, and you know, like whatever. Like if a giant tsunami hit us right now, like nothing of this would be around. Like nothing of like this would be crushed into oblivion.
Well, and that's happened at least a few other worlds. Like, you know, that's possibly already happened. That's why when they all of a sudden find nails inside of rocks that are ancient, and they're like, oh wow, well where did this come from?
Right.
Or a computer.
Or like those hammers inside of stones, or that.
Yeah.
Like Greek computer, what's it called?
Right. Yeah. That computer that they found, and it's just like, oh, no explanation for this. Carry on.
Well, that's an anomalous item that was probably used to calculate sea bearing. You know, like you're like, okay, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah. But you know, I keep thinking now that I'm living on the coast and I'm like looking at the water every day and thinking how water holds memory. Like, even though it would be forgotten, it's never fully forgotten. There is always going to be at least part of it, maybe not the full history, but there'll always be remnants of the phone or something. Something will be there because of the fact that water has memory. For that thought alone, or that quartz can record things, that it's always going to be somewhere recorded.
Yeah, I wonder like how long it has memory for, like forever. So what? Because like, has the water's been like in this cyclical cycle of recycling for as long as the planet's been around, right? I guess.
Yeah, I would think it would be forever. That's my guess, because why not? It's like water is conscious also, and I don't know. I always think, wow, this water. And it's becoming activated again. Like people are intentionally activating water, and water is getting activated. That's part of the reason why we're able to have this awakening right now, because of all of our water is connected and to each other and to the earth. That this awakening is happening. And as the ice caps are melting, that's the other thing. I was thinking about the ice caps melting, and I was like, well, the ice caps are melting. And even though this is a bad thing because of that, it's actually bringing the awakening, because it's all that memory that's stored is now flowing into the oceans and re-enlightening us.
That's a good, like, I like that, because that also kind of would be like, okay, maybe that's why people are getting Atlantis, Lemurian type, like
exactly.
I don't know if you could
like
call
memories,
but like pings of insight about them, where you're kind of going like, well, maybe that's come from? Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, the activation. That occurred to me like not that long ago, and I was like, oh yeah, so that all had to happen. Like it all has to happen. So even though it's like, oh, it would have been just frozen in time in the Himalayas somewhere, mountain peaks, and anyway,
I always think about like if everything melts and you get into like complete water world, like how much do we actually really know how much is available to melt? Like, because you know, like they like on what is that? I think it was the movie Waterworld. Basically, it's just like there may be like Mount Everest might be a little tiny island, everything else is underwater, and then you're kind of thinking like, I don't know if there's enough ice for that to happen.
Right. I always wonder that too. Yeah, I don't know.
It doesn't
Because
seem like it, but I don't
it
know.
doesn't seem like it either. Maybe Antarctica probably has quite a lot of ice though.
Yeah.
Anyway, who knows?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Even if that's like 1/7 of the continent and you're sick.
Well, maybe it's all going to inner Earth. That's what I think too. I'm like, maybe it's inner Earth taking in some of the water. I don't know.
So big week for UFOs in terms of that UFO, or that there was a article that came. Yeah, there was a big article that came out in the New York Times about confirming like that Bob Lazar kind of story in terms of that there was reverse engineering craft that the government has or whatever. But it's so weird because the only people that I've seen talking about it are already UFO people.
Right.
Yeah. So it's like it's not like my siblings were like, "Whoa, Nikki, check this out" or whatever. It's like, no.
Yeah. I know when I saw it, I actually didn't read the article because I was like,
me either, because I started and it was too boring. Like it's just.
Well, I just felt like, all right, why are we, I mean, like, yeah, okay, everyone knows this already. Okay, so it hit the mainstream press, great. Who cares?
And the mainstream doesn't even care anymore. They're just like, eh.
Right. Well, because probably no one really was into it. I don't know.
See, that's the thing that is kind of, had I like in 2008 or something run across that, I would have been like, oh, whoa, that's just awesome. I would have been all over that, like before I'd ever been into this stuff, really, you know. And I just find, yeah, I think people have chosen their camp of shelter at this point. That's what it feels like, and they're in it. They're in it.
Right.
In their camp of shelter, whatever that is.
That's true. The thing that's been coming up in my news feed is like, these like seeds that are being sent to people from China, which is totally crazy. So people don't order seeds, but they've been receiving like random whatever seeds, tomato, like all sorts of seeds, just regular garden seeds. And so the first place, I belong to a lot of like homesteading and permaculture groups. Mm-hmm. So the first person who posted it was from England, and she received it, and she's just like, yeah, you know, like I got these seeds from China and it just seems so shady, and I have to report them and whatever. And I thought, wow, that's weird. And then the second time I saw it was in a different group or a similar group, and they showed pictures of it, and she received something and she was in Canada. And then the report, and then I saw.
What do you mean shady though? Like they look.
Because some of them are not. Some of them look like, let's say it says tomato seed, and it looks like a tomato seed. But there are other seeds that are people were saying that, like the people in England, they were getting like an invasive seed that was labeled as something else. And they're coming through labeled as earrings, like stud earrings. That's how they're getting through customs, because they're seeds and they're easy to get through. And then I saw in a regular mainstream
news. It could be like eucalyptus or some kind of invasive.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. There's tons of invasive species, and so they're asking people to like burn them and to report it. But it's like, wow, is that like the new warfare type of thing, like an invasive species of seeds? Yeah. So a lot of people are gonna like plant them. Like it's probably not a good idea.
Like the whole thing about like Monsanto should be. I don't care like what good things people say about a Monsanto or not, but like the fact that you engineered seeds that only have one season intentionally for profit to be able to sell your seeds always every year is like a war. That is like the biggest crime to humanity I think that's ever been committed.
It's like a human rights violation.
It is like a human rights, and not only that, but it's become so pervasive that people have to like secretly barter heirloom seeds, like and we've gotten so in prior to World War II, everybody and their mama's dog had a little garden patch for just basic stuff. They may not have been, but like whatever. They had some like maybe 5%, maybe 10%, I don't know, depending on their garden patch. But they had a percentage of their food came from their own garden.
Correct.
And then now it's kind of like maybe 0.05% of people have anything like that, like eat a vegetable that is grown by their own hands at all. And it's like, I did a garden this year, and it's expensive. Like you pay like $3 to $4 per pack of seeds, or if you get an already sprouted plant, there's that. And then you have no idea, like none of this stuff, I already know none of this stuff will grow again next year. Like you have to get in the inside to get these heirloom seeds.
Right. And then you have to save seeds, and you have to know how to save them well. And then if you're lucky, you know, like a mouse doesn't eat it, or like there's some kind of like crop issue. So yeah, food is a serious situation, and growing it is definitely serious.
And I thought to myself this year, I'm like, I need to learn how, in case, like, if I, just in case, like, as a life skill, like if you were on a deserted island, you didn't know how to use a hatchet to open, and all you had was a coconut and a hatchet, like, you're going to have a hard time with it, you know? Well, it's like, okay, like, one of the most basic human things the person should know how to do is to plant a seed, water it, and make save seeds, and then, and have saved seed stuff.
Absolutely.
I don't even know how to necessarily do. I mean, it depends on the thing. Some things are more obvious, like, you know, than others, you know, like tomato seeds. I don't know how to, I guess you get the little slimy seeds out of the tomato. I mean,
and you dry them up, you put them on a paper towel, you take off like the membrane around it, and then you let them dry for a couple of weeks, and then you could pack them. It's not that difficult, although I haven't done it, I have to say, but people have done it, and they say tomato seeds aren't that hard.
But, you know, tomatoes are, like, I flew with this one flight attendant guy who was kind of like, reminded me of Joe Pesci or something. He was from, like, Boston, and he's like, I have to make my own tomatoes, because, you know, I don't like the tomatoes you buy at the store. They have no flavor, you know. And I'm like, that's actually true. They really don't, though.
True. Oh, my mom always says that, but yes, it's true.
And so, like, he was like, here, try some of this. He's always like getting me to try, like, his, you know, like, say whatever, he made a bunch of tomato sauce and tomato pastes and stuff, and he's like, he was showing me pictures of his garden and all this stuff, and I was like, well, like, I don't know, I was like, did you get into, I was thinking maybe he was into permaculture. He's like, no, I just can't stand the taste of the tomatoes at the store. It's like, if you want good food, you have to grow it yourself.
That's correct. He's right.
Yeah.
Totally right. What was I just thinking about the Monsanto thing? Oh, this is not, I'm not sure what it was, but the other day I could live across the street from like this empty lot that's like, it's like overgrown weeds pretty much. But on the far end of it, the other day I saw this guy spraying, and I was naively thinking that he was spraying for mosquitoes. But then he was like walking through the field. It wasn't close to me, but anyway, then the next day we passed, and the patch where he had sprayed was completely brown. And Pedro's like, oh, he sprayed to kill he sprayed to kill it. And I was like, wow, I wonder if he put down Roundup or something like heavily toxic. Well, probably because it was easier than mowing it down, because you're supposed to take care of your property, and then you have to, like, somebody owns that, and they're supposed to mow it actually. But yeah, it was probably easier than doing that. So he just like sprayed it. It's all brown. And I'm like, that's seeping into the groundwater, and it's probably Roundup. Because I don't even know if Roundup's illegal in Mexico.
Anyway. I don't think isn't it still legal in the US?
I think so. Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I was listening to a podcast today with Dennis McKenna, who's like Terrence McKenna's brother. And he was talking about how, like, they're both really into ayahuasca, right? You know, like psychedelics and stuff. But he was talking about how we might be experiencing, he's like, you could also think of it almost like as if it could be inverse. Like, we are getting more intelligent and being able to spread and do these things because of influence of plants. Like, plants they manipulate us to plant them. They manipulate us to nurture them, to grow them, to do these things or whatever. He's like, so we, you know, he had a whole like little thing about how we definitely could be being made more conscious by plant life.
Oh, I think so.
You know, as a way for them to benefit themselves too, you know, like they need us. So
yeah. That's true. That's an excellent point. The other day I watched Brian Scott, like with with Reality Revolution. He was interviewing a woman. I can't remember her name right now, but she's like the tree whisperer. She's able to communicate with trees. At some point, she was able to like she channels and downloads and whatever, but now she's able to like talk to, but more than anything, listen to trees and hear what they have to say. So she was talking about like the whole thing about like the communication behind trees and like how pretty much they're the most giving, like loving, like species pretty much on the planet, like according to her, because they, well, that was crazy, because they just are constantly giving. It's like the giving tree, and they'll just accept whatever you decide to do with it. Like they'll accept if you want to cut it down. They're never going to be like, no, fight against it. But like, yeah, but the trees, like, yeah, they communicate. So anyway, I wouldn't be surprised if they were, if plants had like, you know, an ulterior agenda.
That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, like well, you know, like with that Judema stuff I took, which is it's like a ayahuasca hallucination. Like I felt like I was experiencing plant consciousness, and it was
Yes.
just it's
Exactly.
that's the best way I can explain it. Like I don't know how. I mean, it's just, and I felt like I felt the way they experience time, and the way that the time loops around itself, which is so interesting. But they definitely have a much, from my experience, they have a much just chiller, like they yeah,
View on life.
like be yeah like they're content with being. And
Yeah.
it's interesting because like I have a friend who she claims that she has this one past life memory of being a flower. I think I've told you that before.
Yes.
Yeah, and she says that it was like just a beautiful, happy existence, and she's like, she didn't even know it was short, because in her interpretation it wasn't short, but you know.
Yeah, right. She was true. Wow, and she remembers that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Who
like
knows?
I would love for her to describe how she described that memory to me, but she's like she remembers like opening up in the sun and then closing up at night. Like she remembers like the whole cycle of being this flower. And I'm like, that's
Wow.
interesting. So yeah, I don't know.
Totally. Cool. Yeah, different conception of time.